BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and I want to start this video off with a scene from Kamen Rider Dragon Knights. For context, the Rider Girl ally in Maya, a journalist who's been helping the Riders find missing people and help out the heroes without transforming, is told by the big good of the season that the other Riders, including the original Kamen Riders for the Dragonist world, can come back from the Advent Void, aka a place where it's known as a fate worse than death, now that they found him, but some of them, like Case, ends up needing a bit of time to heal. So said big good in Ubalon gives Maya the deck since Case needs time to heal, changing the structure of the DNA so Maya can temporarily use a Siren deck. Maya does, for the most part, doing pretty well, and in episode 35, she finds Case waking up seemingly almost ready to fight. Here's what happens.
This belongs to you. Being a Kamen Rider, I've never felt anything like it. But it's not what I want to do with my life. I'm a journalist. I fight bad guys better with my words than with my fists. My thrill of victory is when I expose the truth behind the lies.
Sounds exciting. Almost makes me want to give up fighting monsters and pick up a pen. I'm serious, though. People like you let us know why we're really fighting. Without you, the Xaviaxes of the world could tell any lie they wanted. And we'd all just believe it. No questions asked. Keep fighting, Maya.
I will.
And that is a very strong scene. It tells us and shows us, not just the young girls in the audience, but to everyone, that those in a suit and without a suit are capable. One has the means to physically protect others, and the second has the means to use that protection to fight in their own non-physical way to make the world a better place. For the boys, we see two people on the same side and page respecting each other as equals regardless of their position. And for the girls, they aren't judged or mistreated in the narrative for having and not having powers. They realize both of them are important in their own way. Case values the people she's fighting for, and Maya takes those values to help out her friends and the public with the truth. For an action show made for kids, that's a very admirable and respectable take. Female Kamen Riders and female non-rider heroines are important and needed, and no one is less important than the other. Unfortunately, the western side of the Kamen Rider fanbase have a loud and vocal minority now using Gavv to claim that only one is important now, and that has resulted in a sexist and bigoted take from a large vocal minority, going from the debate about whether or not Sachika should become a writer into people actively claiming that with Gavv's success, not only are people saying that the show is a sign there shouldn't be any female writers at all, but now it's sexist if a show does have female writers and anyone who wants female writers is sexist. I didn't know the definition of sexism is wanting characters to have narrative importance equally to the others, regardless of gender. But what do I know? So how did this argument start in the first place? And didn't you talk about it in your We Don't Need Women in Toku video, I hear one of you ask? Go check that out when you can. Well, remember, I wasn't watching Gavv at the time, and now that I've caught up, I've got a lot more to say on the topic. And disclaimer, this is not calling out people who think Sachika shouldn't be a writer sexist, but sexist people who claim to be Kamen Rider fans now claiming that there shouldn't be any female writers anymore. But there's actually 4 camps of this debate. 1, those who like Sachika as she is with no problems whatsoever. 2, those who like Sachika and think she doesn't need to be a writer but wish there were more development on her end. 3, those who like Sachika and think she should have been a writer so she get more development on her end. 4, and those that don't want any female writers at all and are gleefully toxic about that statement. 5, then again, I don't think there's anyone who despises her character, but let me know if you do. Anyway, type Gavv is great in the comments, and let's get started with the bubble. Yeah, we all knew this was coming. The opening had both the protagonists who would become writers with a silhouette of their bubble, and Vram was also colored yellow in the leaks ensued, leading to people to believe the remaining person and girl in the power trio would become a writer. Now, naturally, everyone agrees regardless of which of the first 3 sides are on. That got people's hopes up. And while someone would probably say, well, you can't judge based on the openings, for the most part, especially when you look at the track record of openings, even recently, all of them have kind of been accurate to what's going to happen. 01 had the writers we knew were part of the main cast. The second opening of Saber had Kento alongside Mei. Revice's openings gave scenes to Daiji and Sakura before they became writers. Geats would update the opening where nearly everyone but Sumiri became a writer. God tried to establish Rene and Valvarad in that order in the first version of the opening long before either one became writers. So there was a precedent. As for the people who like Sachika as she is, granted, there is an overlap with 4, with some people being very vocal about them thinking that anyone who thinks that Sachika could have been a writer is stupid, with takes that make no sense the moment you think about it for just a second, but we'll touch upon that later. For the most part, people who like Sachika have stated that even if she didn't become a writer, they wouldn't have a problem with her. The latter ones have pointed out that the people who felt like she didn't need to do more have argued that she was already developed, but I feel like those people don't understand the difference between development and establishments, which I'll explore in the next one. So let's talk about that second group of people who don't think she should have been a writer, but think she still needed to get more development. And I can understand why they think this way. Let's explain the difference between development and establishment. A character can be established with all of their character traits and personalities that define who they are and explains and justifies their actions in the story. And they're only static or dynamic depending on if and how they change. Or if they have a flat character arc where they go through something that still keeps some of the same aspects of themselves but just hardens their beliefs. Whereas character development is about how much they evolve or change and having the necessary moments in a narrative to justify said change. The problem for this group of people is that they don't feel like Sachika has enough of that development or moments in the narrative, and I can't particularly blame them. The only episodes that really focus on her, with her being the A plot, are when the art kids at her grand-aunt's home are being targeted by Granute, posing as someone who could give them opportunities, and she has to deal with someone who thinks that she's being fake, but is assured by everyone and takes the passion to splash paint to expose Granute Dean. The problem is, if you're looking for awesome moments where Sachika is helping out, well, you do have a few more moments. Her calling out Hanto for not trusting Shoma when the bitter Gavv clones attack. Her going to defend Shoma from bitter 2 and breaks into the ice vendor to make a sorbet for him to acquire Blizzard for the first time. The time she pulled out with a bat ready to fight Shoma when he came back jumped by Sita and Jeep. And when she stopped the Dark Chocolate. But those are moments of her doing cool things, but outside of episode 7 through 8, there's no arc for her to go through or journey, which does detract from the show for some people. Let's use a few examples for supporting characters who did get something to do despite not being a permanent suit user. Renge and Sabimaru from Gachard, Miyu and Shu from Forze, and Akiko from Double. With Akiko, episodes 9 through 10 focus on her taking the lead on trying to find her client's father, resulting in her messing up and leaving her alone, and her taking Shotaro's feedback. She comes up with a plan to expose the sweet dope ant by bringing all the culprits together in one place, using Ryubei, who's so disappointed, and while she gets it wrong, the food she makes exposes the real culprit, who's disgusted she ate someone's rotten cooking. So Akiko busts out a chair to defend her client Mai from the sweet dope ant so hard that it breaks. Don't lay a damn finger on my client indeed, Akiko. And yes, she gets the puppet episode later in the 20s, but even Akiko was getting focus episodes in different arcs. Then you have Miyu and Shun. After the focus episodes in the beginning of the show, they're graduating, and throughout the series, we actually see them checking up on their friends and, showing their character growth. But by episode 25 and 26, with graduation, they feel their place in the club is coming to an end, with Miyu wanting to go to the prom with Gentaro, and with Shun genuinely falling in love with Miyu, but relents since he wants her to smile, while Miyu wants to get back to the person she felt changed her the most. But they're also fighting the Koma Zodiacs, who's also trying to end graduation, but Ryusei motivates the two to remember they're still part of the Kamen Rider Club, and they go to help out the team, with Shun using the power daggers to end up finishing off Koma with Gentaro. Then Renge has her two-parter about her village she's been trying to save by earning money this whole time, and the Kyuubi Amalgam fights Hotaro. While Hotaro fights Ninetales, they trap Rene, Renge, and her grandmother inside a tornado of smoke. Renge decides to stand up since Rene can transform, one of only 3 times that was a problem, mind you. But Renge, though scared, sees her Nana trying to cast out the yokai, and she stands up to Ninetales' attacks and gains respect of 5 cosmic chemis, claiming she's going to protect her Nana, and makes a pentagram in the air to fire a combined beam of energy at the illusion to break it free. Comment, don't fudge with the grandma or you get the gram. Heck, while Sachika spends the finale of her show in the kitchen, Mei from Saber spent the last 2 episodes of Saber reaching out across the world to ask everyone to share their favorite stories, even as she's about to die as the world's about to disappear. And Toma manages to use that to restore both the human and Wonder World and the rest of the world and its allies back to normal. And that's what people are looking for with Sachika, that moment for herself to call her own. Someone pointed this out on Twitter, but the thing about Sachika and why there's so many people dissatisfied with her isn't because she's poorly written, but people are frustrated because she's important enough to the plot that you can't exactly remove her and not change everything, but she's not important enough to actually have a story in the show and be given proper spotlight past the Painter and Sunflower episodes. And I'm going to talk about that in the second half of the video. Like, Maybe she makes a grand mistake during a job that results in a Granny taking her customer, and she works with the hunters to make up for her mistake. And we know that she was well off, or, you know, have an episode where the Granny's go to target Javier and is working with the Shoma siblings, and she has to work with the Gochi cells while the others are busy trying to figure out how to stop them. But there's also aspects of her personality people just want to know more about, like were her parents jerks, which led to her wanting to become nice and use her fortune to help out others. Did she ever come across a Granny who changed their ways because of her but never knew? What's a job for her that went wrong, and if there's an opportunity for her to correct those mistakes in the past? Those are minor stuff that could have helped her character go from good to great. But let me know, if you could give Sachika a focus episode, what would you want her to do, and what would you want it to be about? As for why some people would want Sachika to become a writer, I'm going to touch upon in the second half of the tweet I saw. People want her to be a Kamen Rider, so she's given more to do in the plot. People keep pointing out how she was sidelined so hard that she was billed as a third main character in the trio, but it felt like the show completely forgets about her at times. People misconstrued and represent these grievances because Kamen Rider fans are so used to having women be accessories to men that the bare minimum is groundbreaking for them. The tweet, not my words, but I kind of share the same sentiments. And yeah, I agree. Now, Gavv is not the first series to have this problem, but I can name a few seasons where they hype up that there's a power trio in the main cast, and while Heisei in Phase 2 flip-flopped on if the power trio would have one of the male leads also be a writer, yeah, the girl in the trio would almost never get a suit or powers. Not that all of them have to, but when someone made a joke about Gaim not letting Mai become a writer because she's a woman, a bunch of people pointed out to the OP that it was locked to one user, which, yeah, of course they knew, but like everyone was pretty obvious about that. Besides, I was thinking about how in Fies, every time Mari would try to transform with the Fies gear, the girl who grew up with Orphanox and has a DNA in it like the others couldn't do it, or have Kiriko try to transform and drive but not have the physiology for it. Y'all claim Hasegawa and Uchida hated Rene, but they and the producers on Gotchard fight for Rene. Riku Sanju would never have the balls to try having a female writer in one of his shows. Besides, and I am not the only one that pointed this out, Kamen Rider is an action show. If certain people are being robbed of getting involved with the way the main characters are usually getting involved in the central way the narrative resolves itself, aka through action and fighting because of arbitrary reasons like gender, yeah, then people are going to notice how weird that is. And as we said, or as I said, not every female character needs to be a writer, but when people make funny comparisons between this and Build, Nasita ended up with 5 members plus Gentoku and 4 writers, with Gavv having 3 writers, and Sawa and Misora did a lot for the plot too. Even Sawa getting some action scenes where she got to save people. And it's telling that after Build, Zio in every season since then has had a female writer. Because when you think about it, Sachika's main plot beats are just finding out about everyone's secret identities, and then after Bitter Gavv, she doesn't get that much that's not supporting when she used to go out with Hanto and Shoma to stop different Grand plans, save for coming up with the idea to cook for Shoma to make the Gochi cells instead of buying them, which is clever, but not only was that a team effort, that was all she was doing, making things for others and not doing anything herself. And typically, whenever a character becomes a writer, they get a good focus episode or 2 of them leading up to it. Hanto avenging his master's death, Vrem stopping the duo from attacking the others, Spanner finding his flame. Side note, yes, I've been using Finding Your Flame for Sonic Frontiers a lot, and I had my MVC3 files, but for some reason they aren't showing up in CapCut anymore. I gotta work on that. So if Sachika were to be a writer, they'd probably just give those episode or 2 proper setup given the structure of Gav's writing. But the question I always hear, which is people always going, well, given the nature of the show and how dangerous the process is to become a Kamen Rider, I don't want my dear Sachika to handle it. How could she be able to handle it? The whole, but did anyone see that becoming a human and becoming a writer in Gavv is a painful and even dehumanizing process? Yeah, people brought that up in their argument. I agree. My little Sachika doesn't deserve pain. She's way too precious. Okay, first of all, cut the infantilization bullshits. She's not yours. She's Rakia's. Type Sachi Rakia in the chat and comments. Get it straight. After all, why is everyone acting like the surgeries are harmful? As far as we knew, Dente's surgery to Shoma to improve his Gavv to be red wasn't a painful procedure, nor was Vram's or Jet's. Hanto's was painful because he got it from a back alley salesman for revenge that was using him as a guinea pig that didn't have Nev's resources. Hell, Zombie Suga's problem was that Boka made him fuse his body with a corpse of a brainwash-powered Granute, while Suga was on death's door from the fight with Frappe. Second of all, did no one think before Dente died he could have either used one of his organs or take a Granute organ from a part-timer the heroes defeated and turn it into a wearable belt or driver that activates so Sachika wouldn't have to deal with a surgery? Like, when did people start having a lack of imagination in a show about karate bug people fighting Nazis? Third of all, did we forget that this girl hit a granite with paint and tried to take on Bitter Gavv with a cooking utensil? Has dynamite and a chainsaw in her workplace and confronted Longo in the face? Please, like, she even needs a belt to fight. She'll just kick your butt with her aura and words alone. Fourth, I've seen people say it wouldn't make sense for Sachika to be a writer when she's not a fighter. Guys, most Kamen Riders did not start learning how to fight. Sure, they've had tools in their professions that have allowed them to help fight, but Aruto was a comedian who had to get an instruction manual from his company Satellite. Toma was relying on the Wonder Book abilities and creativity as a novelist in the beginning. Iki was a soccer player. Ace had combat experience, sure, but he had 2,000 years compared to most protagonists. And Hotaro either played basketball or at best, or was a cook at his mom's kitchen who had to get nearly his back broken several times in order to go toe-to-toe with a corrupted wrestler, with Shoma having to go harsh training from his parents. Hanto was a journalist, and yes, journalists put themselves in tough situations, but they focus on covering the news while evading dangers. Heck, outside of Yusuke, debatably Kenzaki, Kabuto, Shotaro, Wizard, Kota, and debatably Takaru, none of the Heisei riders were perfect fighters or were trained to fight in the first time they suited up. Y'all don't do this for one character, but for women becoming writers, suddenly it's a problem or restrictor? That's a little weird. Also, comment below, do you prefer when the main protagonist of a Kamen Rider series knows how to fight from the jump, or would you prefer they learn that skill over time? You know I love to hear from you guys. Oh yeah, someone asked if she became a Kamen Rider, who would be the best character for her to go up against? I would say Lizelle, because I find it weird those two never interacted in the show. Like, they're both female semi-main support characters who develop relationships with the children of the Stomach family. But while Sachika is a nice and supportive positive friend influence to all of them, Lizelle is also manipulative and toxic who enjoys watching Deep's misery, with Sachika using her resources to build her life and job up while Lizzo's entitled, and both end the series semi-happy with others and alone respectively. It actually would be fitting if Sachika and Hanto were writers and teamed up against Jip and Lizelle. The fight would be the same with Sachika being able to back up Hanto and knock Lizelle down, so when Hanto goes for the finisher, Jeep taking the hit would feel more weight being worked from the damage that Sachika gave her. If Sachika became a writer, who do you think would have been appropriate to be her final boss or final opponent? Well, at least out of the generals. Also, there's one more thing I didn't consider. So you know how when it came to social media within the show, the Kamen Riders were mixed with some of them being seen as monsters, but over time, those who helped out that they supported started to favor them? I feel like Sachika would basically benefit their reputation if she became one, because not only do people hire her, we've seen her struggle with a few jobs before. A writer form will go a long way to helping that, and if they see a human writer helping everyone else out, they'll be able to trust the writers more easily. Also, Sachika would probably be what Kota was doing when he tried to use his powers for his jobs, but probably more effective at it, lol. What odd jobs do you think would be easier for Sachika to do if she was a writer? She did help out with construction that one time. But yeah, the second and third camps agree that she deserved a bit more to do in her own story. So why did the discourse go from being torn over whether or not she should be one, to both sides looking at the group now claiming they don't want female writers anymore? Well, let's look at a certain video, shall we? So, Thomas J. Jube also made a video regarding the show being almost amazing, and while I didn't agree with everything, I thought his review was sound, but apparently based on what he said on Sachika, people are claiming that's all his video and critiques were about, when he pointed out not only did he think Sachika did not need to be a writer, but his main issue with the show was the villains. In fact, you want to know what Thomas J. Jube actually said about the video with Sachika? Here's what he said. Now, let's talk about Sachika. I like her as well. She's a great character with the other guys. On her own, she's a nice, fun, bubbly character. Like, she adds that fun dynamic when she's not a writer, but helps them out. Basic ally Kamen Rider stuff, and she does it well. She's a good ally character. I hardship her with Lucky. I hope they get married. All I'm trying to say here, but that's also kind of a problem. I feel like something's missing with Sachika. As a component of the story and in the show, the other three got fully fleshed out backstories, motivations, a bunch of character agency. For Sachika, it's not like she needs a reason to open a shop. Everything Sachika does is in service of the other three characters. It's not like she ever had her own storyline or arc outside of the 1-2-parter. Besides that, everything she does with the other characters, and I like the story she gets with the other characters, saving Shoma from going to Granute's world, Laika's monster form, act. I feel like she didn't have a lot on her own, and she didn't need to be a writer to do that. I'm dipping my toes into the Sachika writer debate. I'm on the side of she didn't need to be a writer to be a better character, but it is noticeable that she is not important as the other writers. If they made her a writer, would that have changed? Would she have become more a writer? Who knows? That's not the show we got. If she became a writer and she got more important as a character, great. I don't care if she became a writer. It's more important. He said, I'm more important, but I make word flows in my own video. We don't judge. She gets more to do as a character, more of her own things to do as a character, I guess. Maybe they make her a writer and she was still in the service of the other characters, then I wouldn't be as happy. You know, we could have had a hypothetical size all day. That's not a word. All day was Sachika becoming a writer would have made the show better for me. I still think they could have had room for improvement with her that did not require her to be a writer, but they also could have made her a writer as well. Part of her, that making her a writer or not thing is also because this is the first season since Build to not have a girl transform into a writer, and shows them, debates them, if a girl watch any of these seasons, there's at least one girl in the shows where she can go, she's a Kamen Rider, I can be that too, but also says a girl can watch Sachika's character and see that Sachika's a real cool character, I can be a cool person too. But it's also called Kamen Rider, and he goes into more detail and talks about how the villains were the drag of the season and part of why that lowered his expectations, despite the fact that he said at the end that Gavv is a good season. And, I mean, he didn't say anything wrong. Japanese girls and Japanese guys watch these shows who are kids, and giving them good role models who transform and don't transform shouldn't be a problem, right? But that comment section is just incel kingdom. Like, yikes. I will get to some of them, but it is so crazy how people are acting like he said the show was bad when he said it was good. And he said it was little issue. He spent more time complaining about the villains. But now people are commenting on Twitter that he didn't say the show was that good when he said it was good. Like, he had X8, Geets, Deno, Bill, Kuga, and Saber above it, but he put it above Gaim, Gotchard, Double, Revice, 01, and Zio. Ranked 7 out of 13 series for a series of shows he admitted he likes, but is not a bad placement, especially above Gaim and Double. Why are people acting like he said he hated the show? Is Nuance dead? Let's start with the comments. Oh, I heavily disagree. We don't need female writers to be mandatory almost every year, even if it's a current trend. Ryuki did it first, but Heisei and Neo Heisei mostly didn't have female writers anyway. I'd rather have well-written female characters and important femme writers that turn a good chunk from the series runtime. Even if I don't count Agito's sister, we have had female writers in these shows and our movies for Ryuki, Blade, Hibiki, Decade, Forze, Wizard, Gaim, Ghost, X8, and Zio. That is 10 out of 20 Heisei series. 11 if I count Dragon Knights, out of 21. And what proof is there that they were first? Until Akira, all of them died, and Kivala was trying to save Decade. Nadeshiko's made from DNA based off Forze and a random suit. Mage was avenging her sister. Mariko was brought in with the new generation writers. Alia was a princess that had ties to the Necrom system being made. Poppy was a bug star in the plot along with Neo becoming the ride player that the heroes needed to clear Kamen Rider Chronicle. And Tsuyukomi was being planned to be a writer in the first place. And again, if people are complaining that the girls are being underutilized, how are they taking away from the series runtime if they're not doing anything that much in the runtime? Yo, but it's a fact, female writers were not written well. Tsukiyomi, Valkyrie, Sakura, and Majay, they all sucked as a story. Saber and Revice did well because they used the female writers as one short story and didn't use them that much outside of that. Tsukiyomi was the person in Zio keeping that cast together before she became a writer. Valkyrie was underused after episode 16. Is Sakura handled well or not? Majay had a complete story but had small segments that needed to be filled in more regarding her characterization. And where's the Neon Discourse? Y'all love Nago, but won't bring her up in order to make a point that every female writer is bad, huh? Kamen Rider is a guy's show catered to boys. Girls don't watch it for a female writer. They watch it for the attractive guys. What males and females want is different in Japan, and this show is for the Japanese audience, not outsiders. Same with manga. If they start out appealing to outsiders, the story goes down. First of all, Kamen Rider has had male and female audiences attracted to them all the time, and considering the main demographic of the show was kids, well, yes, the majority is going to be focused on boys, but there are going to be girls who are invested in the show. The Odagiri effect, believe it or not, it's true because of the women, but we've also seen with Gotchard, they got a lot more female viewers because of a multitude of factors with that show as well. And that show ended up being the second most successful Rider series in toy sales. And don't act like some of y'all do not be watching Kamen Rider for the attractive women. No disrespect to the Gooners, but some of y'all be thirsty for Glada. And I know you also were for Lachesis, Samure, and I was there for the Minato and Marika glazing, Medic simping, and Izu lusters. So don't pretend some of you aren't watching for the women. After all, a good show is able to appeal to multiple demographics even if it's focusing on its primary target. That's why Young Justice did well with both men and women, and Cartoon Network was too stupid to try and sell good merch for anyone besides the boys. Okay, this is the funny one. Kamen Rider is great because it stays on its principal beliefs. Look what happened to Gotchard, making a female as the second lead killed her. She's still alive, but whatever. Majade was mostly forgotten outside the fight scenes. Yeah, I didn't forget her enough to start making fan fictions about how she wasn't meant to be a secondary despite all evidence of the contrary, and the fact that she had more development in the first arc, which is what led her to become a Kamen Rider first before Spanner did, since she actually grows as a person, while Spanner's jealousy and downfall led him to reforge his own beliefs as a Kamen Rider. Also, becoming a Kamen Rider in this season meant that you were weak and needed outsider influence to be stronger. So Shoma was weak despite being a good person, even after all the brutal training he endured, and the fact that his family was after him, giving him the resolve to protect human beings from his family's actions. Was Hanto weak for enduring the granite surgery, going through hell to avenge his mentor? Was Lakia weak for fighting to avenge his brother and fighting his way through obstacle after obstacle? What good would it have made to make Sachika into a rider? To me, it'd be a disgrace making a strong woman into another generic rider. Wait, if she's a strong woman, how would she become a generic female rider? What makes a generic female Kamen Rider in the first place? Dying isn't a requisite anymore. You're not exclusive to being in a movie, so what makes one generic? People always whine about wanting female writers, but fail to recognize that once when women become writers, the writers just tend to forget about them. Not to say there should never be female writers, just that they have to be more than quota meters. Broski, it sounds like the problem is that certain characters are underutilized and the solution is to use them more in the story or finish to complete the character arcs that just happen to be women. So if the solution is that writers need to use them more, why are we complaining about them not being as active as an excuse to say they shouldn't be in the show at all? Sachika is the best Kamen Rider heroine since forever. She should have been a writer to his cap. The fact that she doesn't have to physically keep up with the boys to be valuable to the narrative is her greatest strength. In a way, she's basically the Detective Ichigo of Gavv. Ichigo fought Grongi and killed one of their leaders. Yeah, he killed a woman. You were actively saying you want Sachika to fight and beat Granoots without powers by basing it off of Kuga's unofficial secondary rider. I can't make this up. I personally love that there was no female rider in this one. I'm all for female writers, but it's a nice break every now and then, especially when you've got a strong companion in Sachika. Sachika was fleshed out through her actions rather than exposition, which was a nice change of pace. We learned a lot about her as a character through this. Pause. You love that there was no female writer, like you were jumping and cheering? Like, hooray! I don't have to worry about suited women! Bro, who hurt you? Again, I can understand liking her character, but being fleshed out in terms of personality does not mean you're getting development. Again, we learn about the type of character she is, but we don't learn anything about what made her that way either. And again, show does not mean exposition. You can show a character's backstory without telling us what happened, which is why people who think she deserves better or is asking for. And what does that mean, nice break? Should we take a break from having secondary writers? Tertiary writers? What about getting rid of combatants that just happen to be of a particular gender a good thing? Hanto and Lakia didn't need to be writers, did they? They just needed to be able to fight. And if you're saying, oh, we've had too many female writers, in terms of the main cast, we've only had like 7 main ladies. Tsukiyomi, Valkyrie, Sabala, John, Aguilera, Nago, Majade, maybe Papa if you count her. 12% is not a lot. You know that this is a show aimed for boys, right? You're saying we should add a character as a writer for somewhat of a minority of girls that might watch what's intended for boys instead of watching their own shows? The population in Japan is 51.18% women to 48.2% male. Japan has 2.98 million more females than males. Considering how popular the network is that the producers know some girls go from watching Precure to Kamen Rider, yeah, I'd argue a show that does a good job being able to bring in appeal to 2 genders would help boost sales and revenue. It's the main reason why Super Sentai always has at least 1 or 2 girls on the team, but they're never the majority, because kindergartners who would watch it are primarily boys with a few girls. As they grow up, the boys will keep watching with Kamen Rider, while the girls would either move on to their own shows or stay for the Ikemen actors. So there being girls there, that means it's very little to them. They're there for the eye candy and possible BL, not to feel represented. There are female fans who like the show for the characters and the writing, like Keza, and I'm pretty sure they don't only like the show for just hot, pretty guys. There are female tokutubers who talk about the women in these shows, and you don't speak for every woman who watches Kamen Rider, especially since every Kamen Rider season has BL scenes. Well, using your own logic, there should be fewer female writers because it would show girls that there were other ways of fighting. Like in Sachika's case, that doesn't require them to suit up to be cool. And why stop at adding female writers? There have been fewer female writers throughout the years because most women are supporting characters in Rider and outnumber the number of female writers. We have seen girls do other ways of fighting. The point was that you can have a show with both supporting female characters and Kamen Rider suited female characters. They're not mutually exclusive. Precure should start adding more male characters then. If we're worried about girls watching boy shows, why not worry about the boys that might watch girl shows too? For Christ's sake, stop using Precure as a gotcha when you clearly haven't watched it. Not only are most Precure seasons written by men, they've gotten better. Komura was the head writer for Healing Good, but we'll talk about that later. They've had male fairies power to girls, but also male Precure and magical boys become regular and dark heroines alongside having male allies. For example, like Happiness, where Phantom turned himself into Cure Unlovely while Seiji fought the Mooks and got his own evilish red form as the true villains recruited second in command. Or Kira Kira a la mode, where Picario gets a magical boy suit as a pseudo Cure and helps out the team, with staff notes claiming he was going to be considered Cure Waffle. Haguto, Henry Wakayama, was an ice skater who started off as a rude but caring ally who claimed girls can be heroes and boys can be princesses, helping the girls fight a monster based off one of his classmates and securities that he would have a very close bond to later on, and then became the first official male Precure in episode 42. The season finale also ended with almost every recurring male and female side character becoming a Precure. Delicious Party Precure had Tsukumi, the guy with a crush on the lead girl who became a cook fighter, helping the girls occasionally to find out the truth on why his father was branded as a traitor, while also getting a device that allowed him to transform into his black pepper state. But if we're so worried about representation, then we can't just ask one side to change for what if audience will leave the audience alone? That's called hypocrisy. As if having male characters in a female show would ruin the show, or having female characters in a male show also ruin the show. Like other examples in Soaring Sky Precure, where Tsubasa becomes Cure Wing in the first arc and joins the heroines in fighting to protect one of the other main characters throughout the majority of the show. Not to mention, in the other Precure series, we have Fairies and Pop, who would help the girls fight the second in command in Small Precure. Harry was the group's friend mentor in Hakuto. The Prince and Go Princess helped out, that one I haven't seen yet. And then there's Joe from Doki Doki Precure, who was the fiance of the princess who petrified the big bad with the lead curse, attempting to find her and helps fight alongside them before leaving to try to find his former lover. Also, speaking of Doki Doki Precure, I just remembered the episode where Sebastian reverse engineered the girl's transformation gimmick to transform into Cure Sebastian, and it's hilarious. Actually, I know I didn't watch Wonderful Precure all the way, but I did watch any episodes Satoru got focus on, and not only did he become a magical boy with Daifuku in the movie, unlike most Kamen Rider seasons that went to the end of the show or the movie to explore it, Satoru actually axed out main girl Iruha and became the first official couple in Precure, when it took from Drive to Geats for that to happen in Kamen Rider. Ha! You got beaten by Precure, Kamen Rider. You're the exact type of person I was worried about when Gavv ended. It's a good show, but it doesn't have female writers, so it's not an amazing show for me. I mean, me personally, I think Gavv is still an amazing show. But again, he said the show was almost amazing. A 7.5 out of 10 does not mean no one thinks it's a bad show. Oh, this is one of my favorites. People worried about quotas and genders instead of storytelling and characters is why Americans are ditching their own shows for Asian ones instead of appreciating them for what they are. If you want a story to restrict how little it uses characters because of their gender, you're the one with the quotas. But then again, certain Kamen Rider fans only want certain shows written in certain ways, and don't make me laugh with the American ditching their own shows for Asian ones. American and Asian media are inspired by one another all the time. Kamen Rider Dragon Knight did better in Japan than Ryuki did, and I'd argue it has a better story. Meanwhile, most of the popular Korean media are stuff that caters to things people like in America, aka teen dramas and revenge stories. The only difference is the ethnicity of the writers. Vigilante is a great show from what I've seen, but if you think American media has never talked about having a vigilante protagonist, I think you need to watch more shows. That being said, these are not even some of the worst things I've heard. For example, first of all, the only time I ever want to see Bulma fight is Vegeta in the bedroom, but it would be really fun to see her pilot a mech and fight in there. Again, who said that the main character has to be gay? Like, you can't blame any fan for a show where men are constantly putting their faces one another in homoerotic tones, especially when one of the taglines is heated drama between men, and then get mad if someone asks, hey, is this gay? Personally, I don't care, but if I was, I wouldn't have a problem with it, and if I wasn't, then I still don't have a problem with it at all. Wait, pause. They're black, so they should be either a villain like in Ryuki? Who was a black villain in Ryuki? Keep American politics out of Japanese media. Does that include Gaim, where the other world leaders were behind the Drizzle conspiracy to cover up the invasion of Helheim? Oh, this is one of my favorite responses. Majority of the best seasons all have no female main cast writers like Kuga, Agito, Deno, O's, Forze, Build X. Funny, even if we're not including temporary writers like Erika becoming birth and O's, Nadeshiko was almost in every Forze related movie, and how very interesting in terms of fan favorite seasons, Ryuki, Gaim, X8, and Geets were left out, and by interesting, I mean convenience. Okay, this is my favorite comment response. The discussion of Sachika becoming a writer in my head makes absolutely no sense. Sure, it's always cool to see a female writer, but can you really look at Sachika and imagine her going toe-to-toe with a granny? No way. And this is my favorite response. Ninja, we had Poppy Pipapano fighting Kamen Rider Conus. What are y'all talking about? And the funny thing is, people had pointed out Hanzo was able to fight while still recovering from surgery, so like there's no reason Sachika couldn't fight. And someone was like, Toku Twitter always has the worst takes imaginable. Poppy never fought Kronos and never won a fight after she turned good. That is not true. Yes, it was not a solo fight, but was I the only one who rewatched episode 37 where Poppy joined Emu and Kiridia into hunting their Kronos? And she did it in a nursing outfit too, fighting him with the others, and the moment Emu hit the restart button back, they triple kicked him straight into the parking lot floor. The only reason they didn't finish him off is because Kronos manipulated them into leaving by having Hiro try to stop Prado to stop Emu from transforming. But we don't leave out context on this channel. Besides, when has being a woman stopped anyone in this franchise? You know, like Wizard, where Mayua's mage fought Medusa to a draw and overpowered her in the final clash despite Medusa being a phantom general. Gaim, Yoko beat the crap out of Kaito and Kota without even transforming. X8, Nico beat a Bugster on her own, and that's before she started helping out the other riders fight the others to get their trophy. Tsukiyomi stopped the meteor untransformed and can time freeze in her rider form. Valkyrie beat the crap out of her abusive boss without a final form and just with Vulcan's help. Sebala defeated a Lord of Wise with 2 seconds when her brother couldn't. John defeated an Acolyte on her own and saved Agarella from death by defeating her in a 1v1 combat. Nago saved several lives, fought Vision Diver users, made it to the finals of her first game with nothing but regular arm buckles, and saved Sai's family, then finally defeated Bebrado with her own fantasy buckle. And Rene, a 17-year-old high school student with depression, kicked the Dark God Eldritch Abomination to death. So, if the argument is realism, I don't see that as a problem, especially since when you take all these accounts into consideration, these are all just people who happen to fight in really extraordinary circumstances, and it's no different from the men in the franchise kicking gods. Replace Rene and 17-year-old high school student with amnesiac adult chef, and you have Soichi from Akito. Which makes sense when you remember Gotchard was pitched to be Agito too. Not sure I agree with Majade being Gills, given Gills and Valvrod have the hard to control powers, while G-Dune and the Alchemist Drive were created by humans, but I can see what they mean. Also, let me just play ball for Junko Komura, because I've seen people say that Komura might be, but I don't agree with that take. That's not to say women can't have internalized sexism or misogyny, but I've never gotten a vibe from her female characters that she doesn't like to use them. Again, she wrote Mage versus Medusa, and that's a better closure fight for her than some writers getting their own seasons regardless of gender. But I do feel like I need to talk about Komura because there's been like a lot of questionable hate she was getting even before the show started, once it was revealed she was the head writer. Like, there are people saying that she's written nothing of quality, and even if you have issues with her or some of her seasons, since, you know, not every season is going to be great of a show, you can't say they were completely flawed. Like, there's at least one element of her shows that you like or at least can respect. Komura's strength is that she's able to make the main cast at least likable or sympathetic enough and create a strong endgame, for the most part. And usually with her main character, she's able to give them a very emotional through line based on what they're doing. Komura's main issues that she needed to work on, that we have seen her improve on bit by bit, is that with a story with multiple heroes, half of them do not get a subplot, but just focus episodes. How the thieves had Zamigo, who was a reoccurring threat in the beginning. Meanwhile, the cops had Green Senpai be killed and replaced with a copycat. And we don't get this plot line until like the mid-40s. But no one says get rid of all the Powder Rangers like we do with female writers. Y'all point out the Powder Rangers should have had more character focus and developments. And yes, sometimes she has a habit of spinning her wheels with her villains. Or like in a core group, she will give like one or two of the lead's main focus while not developing on the rest until the end game outside of short character beats. Yes, we still see those problems with Gavv, and I do knock points for that with the show, but I will always give a writer credit for improving and what he or she or they did right with them. Besides, I know she can write a good heroine. Norika from Healing Good Precure has a great story, and while Sachika is becoming a bit overrated, I still like her. Gavv might be my third favorite Reiwa season, but we'll have to see what happens next. But there is a valid argument that Sachika didn't even need to be a rider. There were other women in the show that could have filled that role. Besides, it's not like Gavv didn't treat its female cast weird enough that Sachika seemed like the only valuable candidate, right? Oh, yeah. Alright, let's talk about the problems with the other women in the show. Sita's only role was for Jeep development, and the writers picked Jeep over her to live, even though they were the same character. Valid argument to be had in that Jeep was chosen because with Lizelle coming up, it makes sense for him to end up with a girl. But we could have fleshed out Sita more before she died, or at least making her more of the dominant one, since Jeep constantly ends up motivated and following her lead. I still like her though, well, at least the parts where she actually gets to show up in dead flashbacks, but again, mostly to motivate Jeep. Michiru, Shoma's mother, was one we also did not learn that much about, especially since we never learned about why Boche picked her. Were there any signs of romantic connection that led Boche to pick her to be his wife? Look, we know that the circumstances were present and he likely found her in the human world, or at least had her agents bring him over to the Grand New World. But what attracted him to her? We don't know the circumstances behind why he would choose her to marry him, besides the fact that his wife was sick. And considering that she's one of the driving forces for Shoma, as well as another character who's related to them, yeah, it's kind of a shame we didn't get to learn that much about her. There's other characters in the past who, even when they died, we learned a lot about, like, Sento's former self. There's also a problem with Boche being underwritten too, since we don't see enough from the flashbacks to see if he really loves Shoma from his perspective. We know he trained him to be strong, and both him and Dente claim he loved them. Like, sure, from the twins, we saw them ignored for him to focus on Shoma and Mitsuru, but we never hear from his own words what attracted him to Mitsuru. What he thought of the Stomach's family business. Did he not want the company to go too far? Was giving Shoma the Red Gavv a means to create more business? Did he hate that his children were becoming monsters and went to the human world to find someone more empathetic? Was finding Mitsuru motivated by the loss of his first wife? Heck, we don't even know anything about Boche's wife or the other Stomach's mother. That was very easy writing motivation to feel like that because the Stomach's regular mother was sick. They saw having a human mother as a stain and disrespect to the original mother. Did Zom not like her? After all, we know according to Zom, she had a weak and sickly body to the point Nev took the brunt of his verbal abuse. Hell, we don't even know the name of Boche's wife, which is weird. If she didn't die, it's possibly likely Boche wouldn't have forced Michiru into marriage, and then we wouldn't have Shoma. So for a character like that to not even get a name despite how important they are to the narrative, it's just off. Lizelle. She's a weird case for me. There's a valid argument she's there for Jeep's development, though I think her development came towards the end with Boka's death, which is why for some she feels undercooked. But yeah, she's haughty and sadistic, raised spoiled by her father, and likely because of his wicked nature, she feels she can do whatever she wants. The thing that's lacking for her is the drive to be like her father. Does she genuinely believe misery for just the person she loves is the way to go because she's entitled to everyone, but Jeep is the only person she treats like that? There needs to be a trigger for her behavior because while I don't hate her, they're just that lacking personality and just, okay, she's entertaining, but what more substance is it to this character? And then there's Glada, who will do something every 10 episodes, but she barely acts upon her character traits until the end. She doesn't want to be seen as weak, emotionally and physically, and proves it by killing Dente, but this crash out for her starts and ends between episodes 38 and 40 when she dies. There's no rematch with Hanto. Despite caring the most about her family and sisters, we don't see her going after Jeep or any moments where she's trying to keep the rest of her siblings safe, outside of arguing with Lizelle or recognizing she's just using her brother. Or if she killed Michiru because she personally felt like she broke the family. Heck, we don't even know how she feels about Zom or Boche. Something we know at least Longo or Nia have at least touched upon. Heck, people say Gav's weaknesses are the villains, and the bitter Gavv sidelining the Stomach arc was the problem for every non-Suga antagonist. Like, when Kloto felt bad about her family breaking up, she hesitated to fight Lachesis. She tried going out on the field to prove herself so they wouldn't have to go and fight. She didn't rat out Lachesis to agree on despite her talking about betrayal, and she ended her story arc fighting for them in her memory when they died. Like, for Glada specifically, she hates Shoma. Why not have her interact with his clones since they act like more of the person she wanted her half-brother to be? Strong, violent, and doesn't care about consequences. Like in episode 20, she was impressed with the real Shoma growing strength so much she acknowledged him as the youngest member of the family for the first time. But since they don't fight again until like the late 30s, do something with that. Have her and Bitter Gavv finally treat like that Shoma as the one she always wanted, And when Shoma is able to tie with both of them, or at least kill one of the clones, Glada could get upset since she knows he'll never come back to them, and she finally had a Shoma who could get on the same page with them. That would fit the whole Glada is a brute and Glada cares about her family role without completely sidelining her or forcing her to lose a fight this early. While I don't mind being a horny mutt towards certain characters, I will say when other people are pointing out that, yeah, Glada was kind of absent for like a good chunk of the series and then died after becoming relevant, and her popularity, while it shouldn't always be a factor in how a character gets treated compared to others, but the fact that they did not do a lot with a character is a valid point, especially if you're talking about ways to improve a story or characterization, even if you like it, which is something I have done before. But someone's going like, oh, but we know her character shouldn't need a flashback in her killing that they see the deal on her. I love that none of the family got redeemed since their actions were horrible. Broski, no one is saying Glada needed to be redeemed. We just needed her to spend more time in the story acting on her character traits more. If people like a character, they're going to want the characters to actually feel more fleshed out and do things. It's not that complicated. I remember seeing a post talking about how certain people were okay with an extremely minor character becoming a Kamen Rider. When you point out Sachika could become one, people were silent. That being said, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a problem with Majin becoming a Kamen Rider. The politics of the Grand New World were interesting, showing that even a politician couldn't resist the narcotic influences of the Dark Treat, or at least someone that interfered in a lot of political aspects about the world. But yeah, a lot of people are pointing out that a minor character that only showed up in 2 to 3 episodes got a writer form before the main heroine ever could. And yeah, that can come off as a bit unfair. So, who do I think should have been the second Rider Gavv, or a female writer if Sachika didn't become one? Honestly, I feel like given everyone complains that Glada didn't have that much to do between episodes 20 and 38, I guess if we gave her a connection to the Dark Shomas and wanted to beat the real one at his own game, I guess she tried using the system for his change after all the clones were dead except for the first one. Especially with Lizel and Boca definitely coming in. There's definitely a drive to prove the stomachs can beat him without their help. But the only problem I have with that is that I wouldn't want the Grand Newt's world exploration, what little we got, to not be explained or delved into. Although I guess we could still have Majin get addicted and seen some episodes of youth parties using him as an argument against Boca's actions. That being said, everyone agreed Sita was underused. You know, if we were able to bring back Suga as a zombie, maybe we could do that for Sita. It's a shame they didn't do this, but usually when a character gets back from the dead, like EU, eventually they're able to get their sense of humanity before they unfortunately have to perish again. I wouldn't mind if we saw this with Sita, seeing how the far the family has become and realizing she doesn't want Shoma or the stomachs to fight anymore, only to have no choice. I don't know, that's just a random thought I had. If you could bring Sita back into the story, what would you have done, or how would you have done it? And that's the problem with the Sachika debate. It started as a discussion about character treatment and relevance to now a vocal part of the community who are now using Gavv to say women don't belong in the series as action heroes. Only support or villainous sacrifices after all the progress Kamen Rider has made throughout the years. If your entire takeaway from the show where the good guys actually communicate, there's a healthy balance of 1 and 2 parters, a strong message about the dangers of drug addiction and human trafficking, how loss and mistreatment shouldn't turn you into an awful person, and the villains needed to be more active in the 20s and 30s of the show, is that women in an action show shouldn't be active in a suit, then that's a problem with you. And before anyone starts typing, oh, we don't have a problem with women in Rider because we like Sachika, if you don't recognize the irony in using the women you like to shit on other women throughout the franchise and trivializing the writing and effort it took to even get both of those type of characters as well as her own, then you have less character development than Makase. Yeah, in the Forze novel, Makase joined the villain Tsubasa, who's taking advantage of the loneliness and resentment that caused him and the others to hate everyone else around him, and after he's freed, he actually offers the girl Smue that he bonded with and wanted to help out with her loneliness a dance. Both of them finally finding someone happy both of them could be with. Yes, the guy who attempted to murder his female classmates for rejecting him now has less of a problem with women existing than some of you. Like, if you genuinely believe there shouldn't be writers of a gender because you think they're underused, then switch the genders of every fan favorite writer you like in your head. Would you dislike them because they're not the same gender you're used to when it always comes down to writing at the end of the day? No, miss me with that bullshit. There ain't no force agenda that the male and female producers and writers who cast roles for both men and women to do something other than say random words of encouragement before 2024 existed, stupid boy. Like, I wouldn't even have Gavv without the woman making and writing the damn show. Like, some of y'all actually sound like y'all will listen to a dude with a podcast who unironically calls himself an alpha male while shitting on women for hours despite never having a girlfriend until the age of 35, who proceeded to leave him for another man and wrote a book called Women Deserve Less. And y'all don't have the balls to tell a woman on a date, hey, I spend my time with the internet telling content creators I don't want a woman fighting people in my action show with a suit on. Because if that's the way you respond to seeing women on your screen, none of them are ever going to want you in real life. I'm just going to keep it a buck. All those commenters could never fathom having the balls to say that to a woman's face or getting physically intimate with a woman unless they paid for it. And like I said, those people who just wanted more for the character regardless of if it was a girl in a suit or not, you are not the person I'm talking about in this video. But here are my closing thoughts. In 2009, Kamen Rider had an installment where a woman in a suit and a woman borrowing the suit temporarily managed to find both of their roles in an action series have value and could coexist against a tyrannical force trying to silence anyone who dared oppose them, saving two worlds through their efforts. And over 15 years later, it's disappointing that that same installment that got so many people into the franchise would have a viewer undermine one of them through a woman they claimed to like if it aired today.